The film department is supported by UNLV Film. At the film department of the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, every story has a beginning. With degree programs for undergraduates and graduates, state-of-the-art equipment and facilities, incredible professional internships around the world, and expert guest speakers, students discover the power and potential of cinema as they prepare for the film and television industry and beyond. Learn more at unlv.edu/film. UNLV Film. Find your voice, tell your story.
Welcome to the Film Department, the movie review podcast of the UNLV Film Department. This semester, we'll be discussing films screening at our partner movie house, the Beverly Theater, Las Vegas's only independent film house and performance venue. I'm Davey Parks, a fourth-year film major here at UNLV Film. For those watching the video podcast, I'm joined with my friend here, Michael, and I would be joined by our friend Simona, but she is out this week. Simona, we miss you, and we look forward to talking about movies when you get back. And I'm also here with...
a mechanic from Myers Auto Body Shop. No, hi, I am Jeffrey Wallitsch. I am a third-year film major, dressed in my Michael uniform. I am also the president of the horror club on campus, Fright Club, and really excited about today's episode. We're going to have a lot of fun.
Well, yeah, but before we get to talking about classic horror staple, let's talk about what's going on at the box office. We got a little battle of the killer clowns between Terrifier 3 and Joker Folie à Deux at the box office right now.
Mm-hmm.
Really interesting matchup between the two. I was not expecting Art the Clown to come out as a victor. I've never experienced what I feel like is the closest thing people get to fantasy basketball, but instead it's psychopathic killer clowns.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It's shocking because the first Joker was so critically acclaimed. I mean, Joaquin Phoenix literally won the Oscar for Best Actor, and the fact that the sequel is like bombing at the box, it's making negative money.
Yeah.
It is getting critically panned. It's really sad. I mean, I'm very happy for Terrifier and Art the Clown. I haven't seen any of them yet. They are on my list. I know, horror club president, how could you not see Terrifier? I'm going to, definitely. I think I'm going to start with All Hallows Eve. I know that's the first time we see Art the Clown, right, if I'm not mistaken?
I think he shows up in the Ninth Circle before
okay.
that, in a very limited role played by a different actor.
Okay.
But yeah, even beyond just the critical consensus behind Joker, I remember that movie being a real moment for people. It was something that, there was a lot of discourse about it, and it was something that a lot of people went out to go see in the movie. I remember it being one of the last movies I went to go see in the theater before the pandemic, and that feels like a lifetime ago.
Yeah.
So I guess that would kind of explain maybe why there's not as much hype, like culturally, behind the second movie. But yeah, it really is interesting that there's just no sort of push to go see it by what I feel like is the general movie-going audience. But as for Terrifier, beyond just the fact that it's this really, gory grindhouse kind of slasher movie, I'm really surprised at the cultural tour de force that it's become, going from this like really independent movie that was funded by Kickstarters, and now it's something that people are actively going out to see. It almost feels like the return of the midnight movie, where you're kind of like daring yourself to go see, can I stomach the level of violence that I'm going to see in this? So yeah, they're not for everybody, and I don't even really think they're for me personally. I'm not the biggest fan, but like you said, I'm really excited about seeing this new horror icon come into being and seeing it outdo a DC movie. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you have a big budget studio, Warner Brothers movie that's doing terrible at the box office. You have Terrifier, which is, I don't know the studio that's producing Terrifier 3, but I'm pretty sure these movies are still somewhat independent, even though they have a bigger budget, which mad respect to them for that. That's awesome. I love that. I love a good Gorno. I love seeing blood, guts, and gore. I love the Saw movies. So yes, I definitely need to see Terrifier. And personally, I'm happy to see Joker get knocked out. It is a bit sad. I was looking forward to it because I like musicals too, and I heard that this one was a musical. So that intrigued me. But from what I'm hearing, the musical elements are actually the worst part of the movie. So that's kind of disappointing. But can't really have an opinion, I guess, until I actually sit down and watch it, which I honestly might never do. So.
And streets say, unconfirmed rumor, that Lady Gaga pushed back her release of her album because of the critical panning of the movie, which is really unfortunate.
That's so sad.
But, we have that to look forward to at least. So.
Yeah. And she's great. She was great in A Star is Born. I thought she was a great choice for Harley Quinn. It's sad that people are not really raving about her performance that much. I mean, Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm, maybe in 10 years it'll be one of those things that people reclaim as a campy cult classic or something. I don't know.
Like Megalopolis, perhaps.
We'll see. But we have a lot of great stuff coming up at UNLV Film here. We have the American Film Market coming up, which is very exciting. This is the first time, I believe, it's being held in Las Vegas, and we have a really awesome collaboration going on between the department and the market. We'll be having some of our students go over and act as interns. It's a really exciting opportunity for a lot of us to get in and learn more about the distribution side of the film industry, which is something that I wasn't really aware of until I got to go to the Cannes Film Festival through UNLV Film, which was something that I'm forever going to be grateful for. But it's a really exciting new frontier for those who are really curious about working in the industry, but maybe haven't found their niche yet in production or screenwriting or post-production. So yeah, we have that coming up.
Well, this week, guys, we're reviewing John Carpenter's 1978 genre-defining Halloween. It's going to be screening at the Beverly October 28th through the 31st. I don't know about you, Davey. I am going to go see it at the Beverly. I actually just bought my ticket. I'm going on Halloween at 9:30 p.m. to see Halloween at the Beverly. Really excited about that. So if any of our listeners are going to be going there and you want to say hi, I'm going to be in the full Michael getup and everything. So really excited about that.
And just to be sure, this is the 1978 Halloween, not the 2018 Halloween or the Rob Zombie Halloween from 2007.
There's 3 films in this franchise named Halloween for some reason. Don't know why. But, I guess we could start here. I feel like this is a good place to start. Do you remember the first time you saw Halloween, what you thought of it, and then this most recent time rewatching it? Has anything changed for you? Do you have a new take? Is there something maybe that stuck out to you this time, Davey?
Yeah, so growing up in a Latino family, there's something a lot of people I've talked with about have as sort of a shared cultural experience, and that's watching horror movies at way too young of an age. I think the first time I watched Halloween, I must have been in about the 3rd grade, and my uncle had this big binder full of pirated DVDs that he would buy from a guy at the local Mexican store, and one of those was the original Halloween. And I remember watching it and just being really captivated by it. There was something about it that was so off-putting about the fact that it took place on a street that looked just like the one I grew up in the Bay Area. It was so uneasy seeing this character who was about the age my sister was, kind of going about and just doing her life, not knowing that she was in such impending doom. It reminded me a lot of the first time I saw Jaws, and I really think that the way Laurie moves about the street reminds me a lot of watching swimmers go out onto the beach at Amityville. And we as the audience know that there's danger and that there's a killer around, but she doesn't. And I just remember that was the first time as a kid watching a movie and thinking that was something the director could do, is, put a character in a situation where something is coming, but they don't, and that sort of built tension. And then rewatching it, I've seen this movie, probably at least 10 times. And every time I watch it, I have that same feeling I had when I was a little kid. And it's just such a fun movie to come back to every Halloween. It's the most festive Halloween movie. It's genuinely the Halloween equivalent of watching Elf at Christmas. So
yeah, I would agree. I think my first time, so I actually didn't get into Halloween until I was in high school. And it was right around when they announced the new David Gordon Green film, so this is 2017. And I remember it was on AMC Fear Fest, if you guys remember that. I don't know if that's still a thing or not. I hope so, but
it has to be.
AMC Fear Fest, they would show all these horror movies. They would show all the Halloweens. And I remember my dad was watching it, and I come in, he's like, hey, come watch this with me. And the 2 things that stuck out to me the first time I saw it was, number 1, the shot. So when you say the shot in Halloween, usually there's the one that everyone thinks of, and for me it was the shot when Laurie is standing and the darkness behind her, and you just see that creepy face just slowly illuminating in the darkness. I loved that shot. It stuck out to me so much. It was so creepy. And then the second one would be not too long after that, when Michael does that really epic setup. By the way, the core strength on him, incredible. Yes. And what I love about that shot specifically is the fact that it could have been so easy for Carpenter to rack focus to Michael, but he keeps Michael out of focus. He keeps him blurry. The focus is still on Laurie. And so it's just this really creepy shot of just his body slowly coming up and his head turning. And so that really stuck with me the first time I saw it. I've seen Halloween a billion times. It's probably tied with Superbad in terms of movies I've seen the most. It's cinematic comfort food. It's a rainy day movie for me. I just love getting in bed and watching Halloween. It's such a, I love seeing Michael tear apart these promiscuous teens. You know what I mean? We'll definitely get into that. This most recent time, I watched it again last night. I watched the 4K, the Shout Factory 4K. It's beautiful, by the way. You guys, physical media is awesome. Support physical media. But I saw it, I think this most recent time, I made a point specifically to count every single time Linda says totally. Exactly. So do you know the number?
I don't.
So it's 11. She says it 11 times. Now I think also in the TV cut it might be a couple more, but I'm going with the theatrical here. I do know this is just a really dumb side note. I don't know if you ever heard of it. There is a Halloween drinking game. The idea is you get together with your buddies, you get some bottles of liquor, and you watch Halloween, and you take a shot every time Linda says totally. So it's 11 shots in the span of 90 minutes. By the end of it, you're either really wasted or you're just as dead as Linda ends up. You know, it's one or the other. But so that was just this most recent time I wanted to count specifically how many times she says totally. So with Halloween, let me ask you this too. We just talked about the shots. In terms of the cinematography, what are some shots that stick out to you? What's something that you like about in terms of how it was filmed?
Well, going back to when I first watched it as a little kid, there was the one shot that I remember actually really scaring me. And it's when, oh gosh, I'm such a fake fan. What's the name of the kid she's babysitting?
Tommy Doyle.
Tommy Doyle. Tommy Doyle looks out the window and sees Michael standing on the porch. And it's this really, it's so dark, and you just see his silhouette, and you can tell based on the way he's standing that he's looking right at the house, and it's like a really quiet shot. I don't think there's a musical sting when it happens, and it's so scary. It's so creepy, and that's what I always think of whenever I think of this movie, is that one shot. And it really embodies the concept of Michael Myers as the Shape. And I think that's what was really fascinating for me is, the really interesting thing about slasher movies is a lot of the times the main villain kind of gets worked on as the series goes on. Jason Voorhees doesn't get his hockey mask until the third movie, but in Halloween it's just Michael Myers. And it's so rare that you watch a movie and a filmmaker just knocks it out of the park and has a perfect villain right there at the heart of the script. And I think that's what really makes this movie work for me.
Definitely, and I'm happy you brought up that shot. I have so many fun facts. These are all my brain. A lot of it is useless Halloween fun facts. The first one there is that in that shot, I do believe that is actually Deborah Hill, the producer of the movie, in the costume because he looks a little bit smaller, and I think because it's a wider shot too, so that's why they wanted her for whatever reason they couldn't get Nick Castle, who is the primary actor that does play Michael for most of the movie. But yeah, and that's a great shot. I love that one too. Specifically those wide shots, because he cuts back to that wide shot a lot of the Doyle, not the Doyle, the Wallace house. Sorry, yes, exactly. And what I love so much about it is it's like it has this like graininess to it, shot on film, right? But also the blue lighting, and this blue lighting is featured throughout all of the film, where you're seeing, it's a cool, crisp autumn Halloween night, and I just love that. I love that they chose to utilize that blue lighting. I love that they chose to utilize those really beautiful wide angle shots. And, that's actually something like I know we're not going to get too deep into the franchise because that's like a whole other podcast. But with like Halloween 2018, a lot of that film was shot very warm. It's very tungsten. And I just feel like, with Halloween, you want it to be blue. You want it to be cool because it really puts you in the mood of what it's like to be there on that night. So that's a great shot. I also want to bring up one of my, I think this most recent rewatch, I think my new favorite shot. There's a really awesome tracking shot where Annie is on the phone and she's walking back and forth, and then the camera's moving with her, and you see Michael in the background, and then it comes back and he's not there. And again, I just love the fact that he's out of focus. It's so creepy. It really is building suspense. And that's one thing that this movie is a masterpiece at building suspense. It is a masterclass of mood and atmosphere and suspense, and you have, you know, very little violence, right? It's very tame, very little blood, but the whole movie is sort of defined by its atmosphere. It's almost like a separate character in and of itself. I thought
that's what was really fascinating this time around, was realizing how involved and dynamic the camera is. And for a long time, I really pictured in my head that this movie had a very static camera, and that's not the case. A lot of this movie is pans and sweeps and, you know, dollies. There's a specific shot where we're from Michael's POV as he's in the car and he's passing the school, and you see the camera look from the road to the school, and you're seeing everything that he's seeing. And it's this very dynamic shot, or the scene where Dr. Loomis is standing there and you see the car pass by him in the background. Yes. And it's such a subtle thing, but it's so brilliantly shot, and not just in terms of what we're looking at, but how the camera moves. And I thought that was really cool.
Definitely. And we got to give a shout out to Dean Cundy for that. He is the cinematographer of the first Halloween. He also came back for 2 and 3. That's why those films also look so beautiful as well. He went on to have an amazing career in Hollywood. He shot all 3 Back to the Future movies. He shot Jurassic Park. And then, unfortunately, the last thing, I think, the last big thing he did was Jack and Jill, which is kind of a sad conclusion to the career that started with Halloween. But either way, you know, this first one, and you brought up the idea of like the fact that the camera is always moving. So I think we should talk about the opening scene, right? The opening scene is defined by the use of, it was called the Panaglide, which is Panavision's version of the Steadicam. It wasn't the first movie to use it. That was, I think, Rocky. I think Rocky was the first movie to use the Steadicam. But Halloween uses it for this brilliant opening. I think it's one of the greatest opening scenes in any movie ever, where you are forced to follow this killer. You're put in the perspective, the POV of this killer as he is, you know, stalking, going through the house, going up the stairs, and eventually killing the girl. We don't know at the time, like, this is his sister, and like that shocking reveal that this is a child. That's like the time that it actually breaks. It's supposed to be one interrupted take. It wasn't. It was actually, there's a few hidden cuts in there, but it was edited very well that you couldn't tell. It all looks like one take. So how do you feel about sort of like that use of the Steadicam? How do you think that kind of enhances?
Well, I think exactly like how you brought it up. I really love watching movies and approaching it from the perspective of the people who are watching it, you know, when it was first released. And I think the camera does such a good job of building up, like you said, that suspense, but ultimately the reveal that the audience doesn't even know is coming, that the acts of violence that we're watching being perpetrated are being perpetrated by a child in a suburban home. And I was really interested in that because I think to understand the impact that Halloween has, not just on the horror genre, but like on America, you have to understand, you know, what was going on in the 1970s. You know, we're coming out of the late, you know, just crime wave of like violence and, you know, televised serial murder trials, cults. The 70s were a really violent time in the United States. And I actually brought this little excerpt from a New York Times article written in 1971. So, you know, I'm bringing my academic sources here. But it says here, you know, they're talking about growing crime in the United States, and it says, according to the FBI, killings within the family accounted for 1/4 of all murders in 1971, and another 40% of the murders were the result of arguments, usually between people who already knew one another. There is no doubt that the fear of crime is growing in the suburbs, probably faster than the crime rate. 4 years ago, a study comparing suburban and slum areas of Baltimore found that the suburban residents were 5 times more likely to be afraid of crime, but actually 5 times less likely to become victims of crime than those who lived in urban dwellings. And I think that's a really good way of kind of looking at what the perspectives of people who were watching this were, that suburban crime, specifically violent crime, was like a huge fear that people were having. And it's understandably so that, you know, they're watching the televised trials of Ted Bundy and Charles Manson and the Hillside Strangler, and all of a sudden they have this fear that, oh, that could be me. And then here comes John Carpenter with this script that essentially says, yes, it could be you, and it's going to be you. And I think that's what really made this pop, because, you know, Halloween wasn't the first slasher movie. It wasn't even the first holiday slasher movie, but it was the one that really, you know, brought it into the American consciousness, and I think that's why. Yeah,
and, you know, I don't have receipts like you do, but I've heard a lot of interviews with Carpenter, and one thing he talks about is, you know, with a lot of horror films, like you look at a movie like Dracula, you look at a movie like Psycho, our protagonists go to the killer. They go to Dracula's castle. They go to the Bates Motel. This is one of the first times where the killer comes to you and he comes to your house. And definitely it plays into that suburban fear. So I'm really happy that you brought that up. I think one thing I also wanted to bring up too with this film, I feel like a lot of people like to go into sort of the subtext, right? The idea of like, well, what's this really about? Like you mentioned Suburban Fear. Another thing that's often brought up is this idea that this sort of Christian endorsement of abstinence and sustaining from drugs. I mean, we all know the scene in Scream that, you can never have sex, you can never do drugs. So I wanted to ask, do you think that that's something that the film kind of brings in? Because, me personally, like I always like to go with authorial intent. That's just me personally. And Carpenter has specifically said that that wasn't his intent. The idea behind the film wasn't to be like, oh no, but kids, if you're living in the streets, you better not be having sex and doing drugs because you'll get killed. And if you're the virgin, you get to survive till the end like Laurie does. So I sort of go with that as well. I don't necessarily think that that's something in the film, but what do you think about that? Do you think that that's something?
I think whether he intended to or not, it's so textually part of the film. Like, so much of the reason why, I forgot to do a spoiler at the top, but spoiler warning if you haven't figured it out this so far into the review. The reason why most of the teenagers die is because they're too preoccupied with sex or drinking to pay attention to their surroundings and be aware of the danger they're in.
Right.
Whereas Laurie is so focused on, doing her job as the motherly protector of these children that she's the last one to realize that she's in peril. And through that, there's been so many essays written about the reclamation of the phallus by, stabbing Michael with the crochet needle. So whether or not he intended to do that, I think the movie does sort of endorse that kind of very traditional Puritan view of teenagers and things. But I don't think it's to the detriment of the movie at all.
Okay, yeah, definitely. I can see that as well. And I do agree with what you said, that the idea is not so... the only reason that Laurie survives is because she is aware. She's paying attention. She's not, her mind isn't, I got to get my freak on, like my friends are. Like, that's their whole thing. They just are so desperate to ditch the kids they're babysitting to go have sex with their boyfriends, whereas Laurie is obviously more focused on that. I know we have to wrap up soon. I'm getting, like, the eye from our producer. So I just want to... conclude by saying, Halloween, this is my favorite movie of all time. And I think the reason why I love this movie so much is because of its simplicity. It's a movie that, critics, scholars, historians, they love to dissect. They love to talk about the psychosexual subtext. They love to talk about, suburban fears. And what I love so much about it is that at its heart, it is a haunted house movie. It is a movie that every 10 minutes there is a musical sting, which, by the way, we haven't even talked about the score. It's one of the greatest scores of all time. But every 10 minutes there's a jump scare. There's something, and it kind of invented jump scares in that way, right? But where Halloween, I think, works so well is its simplicity. It almost plays kind of like a Hitchcockian, thriller, almost like an episode of The Twilight Zone. And what I mean by that is that it's a complete film, right? Like, we have 12 sequels. We have a whole franchise. We have lore. We have, Laurie's his long-lost sister. We have, he's part of a pagan cult, or whatever that bullshit was, right? But the point is, with the first Halloween, it is a story about evil, and it's a story about how it's infected this kid and how he grows up to become this psychopathic killer. And it is a complete story in and of itself. A lot of people think that it ends with this cliffhanger ending of like, well, he's still alive. That means there's more story to be told. But that's the exact point of the movie. The theme of the movie, the ultimate message, when you really strip it down to its bare core, is that evil never dies, is that you can't kill evil, is that he is everywhere, right? You have this epic montage. You're seeing all these locations from the movie. You're hearing the Halloween theme kicking back in again, and you're just hearing him breathing. And obviously the meaning behind that is that he's everywhere and he's always going to be there. And when you have these sequels, when you have this franchise, it dilutes that message quite a bit, in my opinion. So for the people out there who, are listeners who are like, okay, I want to get into the Halloween films, which timeline do I go with? Because there's so many to choose from. There's a bunch. It's a choose your own adventure type of franchise. I'm going to propose this timeline. Just watch the first one, because the first one is a complete story. It's a perfect film. In my opinion, it's not a perfect film. It's so flawed. The acting, come on, like the dialogue, certainly it's not a perfect film. It is for me. But it is when it sets out with a goal, with a message, and it completes that goal by the end. It is a perfect story in terms of a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Well, that wraps it up for this week's Film Department podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's class. And if you did, you can feel free to like, subscribe, and share wherever you listen to your fine podcasts. Just a reminder, Halloween will be showing at the Beverly October 28th through the 31st. And if you would like to go check it out, see it at the Beverly. Support your local theater. Be sure to check out their latest programming at thebeverly.com, including dates and times for Halloween. Thank you, and we'll see you next time. I'm Davey Parks.
And I'm Jeff. And definitely go see Halloween at the Beverly because they're probably going to be showing the 4K. It's going to look amazing. It's going to sound amazing. And there is no better environment to watch this movie than in the theater. So absolutely go see Halloween at the Beverly.
Imagined by the Rogers Foundation, the Beverly Theater brings cinematic connectivity, novel collaborations, live happenings, cultural portals, and a zest for independent spirits to downtown Las Vegas. With a mission to stage uncommon cinematic, literary, and live experiences, the Beverly Theater is Las Vegas's first and only independent film house, storytelling arena, and live music venue. Check out our event calendar at thebeverlytheater.com.